This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 499, Contact Form Initiative. On today's show, we are talking about the Contact Form Initiative, what it is, and how it helped Drupal with our guest, Jay Hogue. We'll also cover local tasks more as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guest today is Jay Hogue. Jay has over 20 years of experience in design and user experience. He is currently the Director of Experience Design at Oomph, leading a team of digital platform experts with strategic thinking, cutting edge UX practices, and visual design. Jay has worked with all sizes of businesses, from national brands to local nonprofits, in the health, higher education, cultural institutions, and new technology sectors as well. He shares experience through writing about emerging technology, creative practices, and methods to attain digital accessibility and inclusion. Jay, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for that lovely intro.
I'm Nick Lapham, founder at Enlightened Development, and today my co-hosts are, as usual, John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM,
Hello.
and joining us for her final week as guest host, Kathy Beck, senior UX engineer at Oomph. Kathy is a senior UX engineer at Oomph Inc., specializing in Drupal site building, front-end development, and accessibility. As the company's accessibility subject matter expert, she ensures digital experiences are inclusive and user-friendly. Kathy is also dedicated to fostering an inclusive workplace and advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging DEIB initiatives as a member of Oomph's DEIB advisory board.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
I will jump in for a second here because I was interested and say that Jay has been on the show twice actually, and the last time was about 7 years ago.
That's a long
Fun.
time and a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was you were on 142, 178, and now 499.
That yeah, seems momentous. I feel like we need a cake
Woo!
or something.
Yeah.
Oh, cakes. That's a good idea.
Oh, maybe we should pick up cakes for next week. And now, to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Jacob Rockowitz, a Drupal consultant and maintainer of a number of Drupal modules of his own. Jake, what do you have for us this week?
The module I'm going to talk about is when nodes have just too many local tasks. You go to a node and there's 10 buttons streamed across the top, and someone has to figure out which one's which, and they only use the first few, which usually is like view, edit, layout, revisions, and translate. Are the daily ones. And would you like to, hide and reorder the less commonly used tasks when you have the usage module or the clone module or devel or convert? Well, there's a module for that. It's my module. It's the local task more module. I created it last year. It's just in a beta release. It's actively maintained. It doesn't have security coverage. It has some basic test coverage. It doesn't require much documentation because it's basically a configuration form where you go in and set up what tasks you want displayed. It is only used on 22 sites. Yeah, the configuration is you can pick the route. By default, it really focuses on the node route, the node edit form route, because that's where the problem usually occurs in Drupal, and that's the most commonly used one. And you can alter that to say you can reweight some of the tasks, you can hide some tasks, and you can set like a threshold to say if there's more than 9 tasks, only show 7 tasks. And what it does, it's a very simple approach where it adds a little extra arrow icon widget at the end of the 7 tasks. And if you click it, it just opens up and shows the remaining 2. And if you and it remembers the state, and it's written in a way where it works on any theme that displays local task in a predictable, normal fashion, just as a list of things. And it applies to the front end and the back end by design. And we can just start talking about it. I wanted to bring it up because there's lots. The module page has a long list of modules that do similar things. This module was written so that it's as simple as possible to accomplish the goal of just hiding a few tasks, not rewiring or rethinking how tasks are displayed. So let's just start talking about it.
Yeah, I have a couple questions too. So I have a feeling I'm going to start using this on a lot of sites, but I didn't realize. So you mentioned you can reweight them, so you can reorder the tasks
Yeah, it
in
just
the
exposes
module.
a little YAML. It's basically it shows you the YAML that it calls a hook and says, here's all the configuration that's going to happen to your local task. How do you want to adjust and weight them so you can move them around? And you could say this needs to go at the end, this needs to go in the beginning, and you can even change the label. Sometimes that's kind of useful.
Yeah.
Shorten it. Um,
I feel like this solves an issue that a client had. So there was a module I think called publish content that gives you a local task to publish or unpublished content, depending if it's
mhm,
published or not.
yeah.
And the problem is by default, it puts it right next to view and edit. And the client, so I had a client that occasionally likes to publish or unpublished content depending on a campaign
Mhm,
that's running or not. And they didn't want to have to edit the page and check the box or toggle it and save it. And so we put this module in to make it convenient for them. The amount of times that they accidentally unpublished a page and didn't realize it for a week
mhm,
because they just clicked the wrong button. But I feel like having um, this module and putting that behind the the toggle that hides the other ones, it's still more convenient than having to edit it, wait for a whole page load, and then, save it, wait for another page load, but it'll prevent the accidental clicks of,
y yeah.
of that action. So, yeah, this module is great. It's one of those ones where why didn't I think of it ages ago?
Well, I mean, here's a question. Like, so I did it, and Gin Admin Team finally addressed this, where they had a problem where they were wrapping the buttons, and finally they put in side scrolling on the taskbar. So if you exceed 6, you have to scroll to the left or right, and I think they're going to keep improving that. So admin themes tend to deal with this, but front end themes, I just keep running into front end themes that don't address that. And I
Yeah,
think it becomes more of a problem because you're navigating the site, hopping from page to page, and there's just all this cruft at the
yeah.
top when yeah, and it's written in a way where it should work on all sites. It's like literally just an arrow GIF. I think it's like an emoji icon arrow, so it just works. It's not loading, it's as minimal JavaScript as possible. I mean, it'd be nice to see solutions like this happen. I don't know, in core. It's very tricky. Like the Gin admin team can't solve this for the front end of a website.
Yeah.
It's not really their responsibility, and
I
that's
I
kind of
think
why the
that's
module comes.
one of the key problems that still needs to be solved in Drupal. But John, what you got?
Yeah, I have like some a few questions, right? So, one is, naming things is hard. Local tasks more. Why not more local tasks? I don't know. That was kind of the one I just came up with, but
Yeah.
that's not a real question. My real question is, I noticed that you on your module page you say that there are a lot of modules that kind of already do something similar, right? I'm wondering why, like, why roll your own? Why not just go and like kind of work with one of those existing modules to do what you're looking for?
All of those modules, and this is the problem in this space, literally, like, lift the local tasks and move them to a whole area of the site and, like, change the UI, UX behind them.
Oh,
They're
okay,
not necessarily enhancing it. Like, they'll move it, they'll make it sticky, they'll move it to the left, move it to the right, and that's the challenge there is, like, I just had the problem was really simple, too many, and wanted just to limit what was visible, not change the UI, UX.
got it. And then I guess my next question here is more about the ordering. So, there's a UI for the ordering. Like it's looking at the YAML and going, here are the elements, and then you have the ability to kind of like add weights and weight them, or is
Yep,
it like you have to
exactly. You
write
it's
your
like
own YAML file?
no, it's exposing the info that like hook, local task, alter
Got it.
that you
Got
can
it.
do it. I mean, I'll throw out like I'm becoming a big fan of ECA and starting to realize that ECA can do
Mm,
like it's a very tricky discussion I'm having with people because it can't do everything in this module, but reordering, reweighting local tasks, that's 100% an ECA thing. It can catch a hook, tweak the data.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, you kind of want to just manage your local tasks in one place. So when you create an ECA workflow for it, you're kind of maybe making things too complex.
So I will say to our listeners before we started recording, I said that I was going to be a negative Nancy on this because I
Mhm.
saw that there were other modules doing similar things, and it drives me nuts when people just kind of roll their own. I retract that
Yep.
statement because I appreciate your wanting to stay like close to core and just kind of like enhance what already exists as opposed to creating like a new UI element, right?
Well,
Um, I almost feel like this could be something that eventually makes it in. I know, makes it into core, right? Because it feels like one of those things that like makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of like, why isn't this in there to help limit those tabs and allow people to do this kind of natively? But somebody would argue with me like, no, that makes more sense to be in contrib.
Maybe it goes into Drupal CMS
Yeah.
since that's moving a lot quicker than Drupal core. It's a little more nimble. It could be a place to try it out, at least.
Maybe. I imagine also though Drupal CMS might not have as many local tasks, but I could be wrong.
I mean, I'll pose a whole different approach where the admin theme takes over local tasks. We are starting to get that capability in styling where
Mm,
and frankly, that might be a more consistent use of local tasks because it should be styled to look like the admin theme because 'cause you're going to switch to the admin theme.
yeah,
Yeah.
No one uses local tasks for tabs on their site.
Yeah.
Like
true.
that it's just
It's
not that use
also
case.
it's also really annoying when you load Drupal, right? You have an admin theme that comes in core and you use it and you're like, "Oh, here are the local tasks." And then you switch to another admin theme and those local tasks are just like gone or missing or at the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Well,
It's
Even the front
I'll
end
jump
has to style it. Yeah.
yeah.
I'll jump in and say, like, I think, um, I didn't realize there were so many different modules related to these local tasks, I'll be honest. But I will say that they are all doing slightly different things, right? So it gives you the flexibility to choose what UX works best for your particular site and client. Like, there's one that puts it on the bottom right, there's one that puts it on the left. There's one that puts it in the admin toolbar. The one that I'm working on that will be released before this show comes out puts it as a sticky banner on the bottom of the page that you can dismiss
Mhm.
or bring back if you need to. So um, in my case, I'm trying to make sure that it's just always in the same place. But if you need to see the whole page, you can kind of hide it and see what you need to see. Now, to your point, Jacob, though, the other thing that I'm trying to do with my approach is I tried to use, CSS variables everywhere I could,
Mhm.
because that's one of the other things that's always irritating to me is that you have these design systems or, widgets or components or pieces, but then overriding them becomes so difficult because especially if it's on the admin side, right? Getting
Yeah.
something available to the admin theme is just so difficult, and CSS variables, I feel like, makes that so much easier because you can just make sure you load. Then you just have to load the variable file in the correct place, and whatever basics you have set will be the same in both places. But yeah, no, I think this is a great module. I think it's a good candidate for Drupal CMS, right? Because it's the kind of thing that people are used to.
Or it's a revisiting, we revisited navigation and maybe the UI
Yeah,
UX team has to revisit how local tasks work because we could all agree it doesn't work when there's 12 things.
yeah,
Like it falls apart.
yeah.
There's a UI and maybe a recommendation on what is the right approach because there's a lot of, you could convert it to drop downs. I think some admin themes do that sometimes,
Yeah, and I
especially
think
on
I think there's
mobile.
been some movement to put it in the navigation toolbar in the upper right.
Yeah.
Um, but
Feels
I'm not sure
feels
if that
like
solves
a
the issues.
this feels like a UI problem, Jay could be very well suited to solve. Feels
Yeah.
like this is his next initiative.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not, but I enjoy the discussion of trying to be as light as possible and allow for any decisions that have been made in previous either front end or back end admin themes to percolate and come to the fore instead of taking over and being super opinionated. It's actually very similar to what we'll be talking about later with the contact form. We had a very similar approach.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jacob. As always, great
Thanks
module of
very
the
much.
week. It's
Okay.
yeah, I'll be using this in some projects. I'll definitely let you know, and
Yeah, I'll
we'll see you
see you
next
in
week.
1 week on episode 500.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Congrats. Okay. Have a good day, guys.
Have a good one.
Yeah.
Mid camp is happening on May 20th. Here's some more information from the team organizing it.
Get ready for MidCamp 2025, happening May 20th to the 22nd in Chicago, Illinois.
At MidCamp, we're dedicated to creating an inclusive and accessible event for everyone passionate about Drupal.
Our pricing model is designed to welcome all, from seasoned professionals to newcomers eager to learn.
Whether you're a developer, designer, or site builder, MidCamp is your chance to connect, learn, and grow within the Drupal community. We accept marketers too.
This year, we're bringing you 25 sessions along with hands-on trainings, a fireside chat with Drupal founder Dries Beitart, and plenty of networking opportunities.
Visit midcamp.org to register today. Tickets start at just $25, and scholarships are available too.
Join us at MidCamp 2025, where the Drupal community comes together.
Thanks, guys. Looking forward to seeing what comes out of mid-camp. All right. Okay, Jay, if we could start with a high-level question. What is the Contact Form Initiative?
Yeah. So, as people may or may not be aware, when Drupal Starshot was announced, there were 14 core initiatives that were rolled out, and volunteer groups were encouraged to apply. Contact Form was one of those core 14. They were determined to be like this group of 14 things was determined to be basically the MVP. If something was going to go and compete against Squarespace and Wix and WordPress and all of the kind of like quote unquote easier content management systems to get up and running. These 14 things represented the core of what Drupal had to have in order to enter that marketplace in a strong way. The user persona for this was a marketing professional, so someone who is not going to be really well versed in HTML and config and the different things that we talk about within the Drupal space. So we really had to take a different approach and make it as simple as possible and meet people where they were and meet the expectations that they've had by probably having been exposed to those tools that I just mentioned, right? So it's a very different point of view um, that we had to bring to the initiative, and a number of people signed up for the various others, and we put our foot forward on what we thought was a fairly simple module that we could accomplish in a short period of time.
So, I mean, now like Drupal CMS is out, right? Is the initiative over? Is it done?
No, in fact, we do have a backlog. We do have some plans to continue to enhance it.
Mhm.
We started simple. And I said module, but I should say it's a recipe that's been
Mm.
added to Drupal CMS core. I'm not sure if that's actually a thing that's different than Drupal core, but it is something that people can install very quickly with a simple click. And what they get is they get a block with a contact form in it. They get a page added to the navigation. The
Mm.
page has default content added to it as well. Name, address, contact us with the form below. Expect a reply in 2 to 3 days. We went with something pretty generic to encourage people to replace that with their own content.
Mhm.
Um, but assumed that, we can't just give someone a form and they'll understand how to put that on a page and how to use it.
Mhm.
We wanted to take it all the way, put it on a page for them. They can edit only a few things right now about the form itself. But in the expansion, what we want to do is give them the ability to add additional fields, probably set these things up ahead of time for them because the web form interface, while very powerful, is not the easiest thing to use, especially for
Mm.
the marketing kind of persona that we wanted to design this for. So, a couple of fields that are probably the most common, let them easily toggle them on or off, adjust a couple settings, and then add in the ability to include a newsletter. So when someone sends a message, do they want to opt into a newsletter? That seems like an also pretty common use case
Mhm.
and scenario. So what we're doing right now is exploring which newsletter modules can we bring in and do that
Mhm.
work for us. There's things like Mailchimp, which are paid. They're
Mhm.
probably pretty popular with most of this persona group, but they are paid. So we want to make sure to also include one that's a free alternative. So at least we have a couple different providers someone can choose from on the onset, and then see if there's the ability to continue to add more as we find popular and supported modules out in the ecosystem.
So that's interesting. There's a lot to unpack there. So let me start with
Yeah.
the beginning of what you said. So it is a recipe. You enable it like you do many other recipes in Drupal CMS, and you decided to use web forms, which
Hmm.
understandable. Web forms is kind of web forms is not kind of a very powerful web form creation tool. I'm wondering why you chose web forms versus core contact forms. And did you have a conversation around that?
Oh
Was it
yeah.
like, "Oh, what do we do? Okay, let's figure it out."
Oh no, no. Everything around Drupal CMS required lots of conversations. Yeah, the two competing factions was using Contact or using Webform. Webform, we went back and forth a little bit. We didn't like it originally because it is very complex,
Right.
but we ended up using it because it is complex and powerful.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot already included in there. There's a whole interface, obviously, but it's a little bit above what we thought people would be willing to use most of the
Mhm,
time. But if someone needed to get there and go under the hood, it's there, and it's powering everything, and it gives you a lot of
mhm,
options. Because it's a part of core, I believe, that was one of the big reasons we went there, and it had all the power that we could expand into in the future.
mhm,
Um, what we actually did, what Philip Frilling did when he put the recipe together was, um, y recipe config can't delete content,
right.
but it can remove and unpublish it. So I believe what the recipe does is it unpublishes the core contact form
Mhm,
and replaces it with our block
mhm.
instead.
Okay.
Um, so it's there, but I think it's harder to find, and it's not going to be confusing to have to. It doesn't look like you have multiple forms essentially.
Right.
Um,
Begs the question a little bit whether core contact is gonna be like a thing in the future, or if it's gonna get kind of pulled out
yeah.
of core. Um, so web forms makes a lot of sense. Something else. So I'm gonna talk about the next thing, which is what the recipe kind of gives you right now, and then in the future, and then I want to dig in a little bit to that. The marketing email sign up question, because I think
Hmm.
I got some thoughts on that one. Um, so web form right now gives you kind of a basic form. If you know a thing or two about web form, I'm assuming you can go and add custom fields to what exists. Right. So like if you so but your use case was for that marketing professional, right? So like
Yeah.
the goal here is to kind of expand on what you've already built. Now, are you guys looking at, or maybe you haven't even thought of this yet, but are you thinking of looking at other recipes that you can add on top of like the basic, contact form recipe for specific use cases? Like, oh, I want a newsletter sign up form, or oh, I
Hmm.
want a donor interest form or something like that.
Yeah, that's another decision point we're going to come to is when it makes sense to have multiple recipes that do complementary things that can
Mm,
work together but don't require each other, and when it should be a feature that's included in the contact form recipe.
mhm,
So my kind of guiding North Star has been much to the conversation we were having earlier, keep it as simple as possible and allow people to add things in, but don't try to force them into any decisions right away that they're not ready to make.
yep.
And the newsletter feels like one of those. The marketing professional, if they do a great job in 6 months after they launch with Drupal CMS, they might be ready to add a newsletter form.
Mhm,
And so, how do we make that easy for them to do? How do we allow someone within who's using the contact form who doesn't have the intention of necessarily signing up, opt in or opt out?
yeah.
Probably opt in, right? But use that kind of as a complementary add-on rather than something that's you have to turn off when it's automatically given to you, or
Right.
make a decision that you're not ready to make quite yet.
Yeah. Look
Um,
at it'd be interesting to look at the so the AI recipe, because when you set
mhm,
up the AI recipe, it asks you if you want to set up Anthropic and or Chat GPT.
mhm,
And when you say, "Yeah, I want to set up Chat GPT," it says, "Oh, okay, enter your key here." Right? It'd be interesting to kind of maybe try to reuse some of that for like, do you want to set up Constant Contact? Do you want to set up Mailchimp? Do you want to set
yeah,
up something else? If so, here's the config that you need to provide in order to just get a kind of a base setup going. Um,
mhm, yeah.
could be an interesting approach, but definitely a lot of things to think about there.
Yeah, we went into it thinking it was pretty simple, and it's actually not that simple. And it is really core to what most other CMSs offer. Um,
He punny.
interesting.
He's being
Well,
punny.
interestingly though, WordPress doesn't. It still requires a plugin to add a contact form to your website. So 20, 25 years after I expected to go and find like, oh, it's been added to Gutenberg or something like that because we had to do a bunch of research.
Mm,
I myself did the Squarespace research, took a ton of screenshots about the onboarding experience, the sign up experience, the configuration experience for that. Others did Wix and WordPress and other players, but I was still surprised to see that WordPress didn't offer something off the shelf, which is pretty wild.
interesting.
So Drupal CMS, went that route, made sure people had what's basically a really simple idea and really simple necessity that most websites have and bake that right in.
Hmm,
One thing that's really interesting to me about this particular thing, and I don't think this is the case for all initiatives or recipes that got put into Drupal CMS, but I feel like the core contact form module exists exactly for the reason that you just said, right? Like it'd be surprising for CMS to not have that ability. And web form, even though it's one of the greatest modules that the Drupal ecosystem has ever produced, definitely isn't a candidate for core, right? It just needs to pivot faster than core can with all the core gates, right? But if we have if we now have this recipe that allows you to kind of get a simple contact form just by applying a recipe, my next question is, do we eventually deprecate the contact form module and just provide,
Mm,
when project browser gets in and we have the ability to just apply it, does this initiative become way to get the contact form into a website? Because
yeah,
like you said, web form has the power that you need, but it's a very steep learning curve.
so yeah, so
yeah.
that to me was the power of core contact forms, right? Like you could turn it on, you could add like 2 additional modules that provided some like really basic functionality that you kind of expected with your forms that core contact forms didn't, and you'd have like a reasonable form solution for your website, right? um but I mean, I think like with the ability to kind of like hide all of the complexity of web forms from the end user that recipes provides, right? Like, I definitely think it's gonna end up, I don't wanna say yeah, I do, booting core contact forms outta core, right? I don't think it like, there don't need to be 2 form solutions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and further, I think the Drupal CMS path is super interesting to us now that it's released, it's out in the world, and we know Experience Builder is coming. Experience Builder, when it lands this fall and gives us kind of a middleware, could be the way that we make this very simple contact form leverage the power of the web forms module, but put a slicker interface on top of it to make it more user friendly and
Mhm.
focus it on the most common things people want to do, which should be the simpler things that don't require you to go deep into web form in order to
Well
configure and set up.
Well, I mean, the nice thing there is you already ship with a block, right? So, and that
Yeah.
block can be included in Experience Builder when you're building a page. So, if you're building
Right.
a page and you're like,
Right.
"Oh, I want to add a contact block here. Let me pull it out of my library and drop it on the page," and like, there you go,
Mhm.
ready to work, right? So, I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's
and
definitely something that's like super powerful.
right, right, and there could be the abilities of duplicating that block, but adding one extra thing in this instance versus another instance. You mentioned
Sure.
donor form, right? So start with your basic contact form as a basis. What other additional fields does that particular use case require? Maybe it's only one or two, and that should be easy enough to do through Experience Builder when you have something to start with.
I actually did a great proof of concept a while back of uh, I think it was web forms with the Stripe integration to build like a donation form,
Mm,
and it was like literally it was like, hey, I have like I think 3 modules, and like those 3 modules basically allowed me to build a fully functional donation form for a website, right? And I was like, huh, this is pretty interesting. Like a recipe like that would be
yeah.
would be a game changer for a lot of nonprofits, I bet.
Yeah, agree. And I mean that speaks to the power of putting a recipe together and how much easier that can be than spinning up a whole module yourself.
Absolutely. We've talked a little bit about the technical parts of the contact form. Why did you want to run this effort for Drupal CMS?
um, I mean, it's an exciting initiative. I thought it was a really interesting challenge. I feel like at Oomph, we are always straddling the line with clients. Some clients are really not technically adept, need the simplest solutions. Others have a deep experience with Drupal, have IT teams that help them out. Um, so I felt like I understood the use case and the barriers that a non-technical user would be up against. I mean, I frankly consider myself one of them when it comes to Drupal. I'm not a Drupal developer. I'm a Drupal user, right? So I approached it from that point of view. It was important as a company to support the software that we use day in, day out and rely on. So that was another part of it. And it felt like a great inflection point to get involved in what Drupal is trying to become. Like they're still figuring it out. They had this idea that the Dries put forward that everyone got behind, but they didn't know exactly where it was going to be going. They didn't know exactly what the destination was going to look like and how to get there. So there's a lot of interesting back and forth and discussions happening that was great to be a part of and to see happening in real time as we were part of the Slack, as we were part of the conversations, how the different recipes were going to work together, if at all. So it just, Kathy, presented a lot of really interesting opportunities that I don't think we've seen in a long time. Um, the amount of people all interested at the same time, all working together towards the same goal. It just seemed like the right time to jump in and see how we could help out.
When you initially signed on, or maybe a little bit before you initially signed on, right? Did you feel like it was more of a UI user interaction problem, or were you like, "Oh no,
Okay.
this is a technical problem and I'm just gonna try to like work through it the best I can?"
I thought it was more of a technical problem, and then I would be kind of project managing other people on the team that would be helping out with that portion of it. But quickly figured out that it was a lot more of a UI UX problem than I thought. All the market research that we helped to do, like to set the stage for a lot of different features, not just this one, really helped kind of shed light on what we were going to be trying to do here.
Mhm.
And when you say UI UX problem, like I imagine you're not even really talking about the end user experience of filling out the
Right.
form. Like you're talking about the person trying out Drupal CMS or building Drupal CMS site and configuring,
Well,
right?
I mean, yes, but I will also say, one of the other lengthy discussions we had was first name and last name fields or one name field.
Yeah.
That's actually a big thorny discussion.
Oh, wait, hold on. Let's pause
Mm,
here. What did you choose?
We chose a single name
oh,
field.
Oh,
full name.
really? Why?
Yeah,
It's inclusive.
because there's so many different name configurations other than first and
Mhm.
last, and they are not um, they're not all the same. And when you're thinking about an international audience, you need to be as inclusive and wide ranging as possible. The marketing persona did give us a couple arguments about like, well, people want the both fields because of putting them into a CRM and sorting them
Yeah.
but why do you actually need to sort them by last name? Like, what do
Well,
you actually need to do with a name?
a lot. Like, so here, yeah, we're gonna talk about this for a minute,
A
right?
lot in
Like,
this very specific country for the use case that you're using it for, but not so much in other.
well, no, but that's not true
Right.
because everybody has a name and everybody's name is deeply personal to them, right?
Yeah.
What?
Exactly.
Those
Right?
Exactly.
wait,
But it
So
That
might
proves
not
my
so
be a
point.
first and last name.
but so here's the thing, right? When and like a bunch of different hats here, right? So like, data integrity, obviously you want to make sure, first, last, or even just name, right, are
Mhm.
stored correctly. But then looking at the example you brought up, right, bringing them into a CRM, okay, that's fine. You have one name field, whatever. But ultimately, like when you want to use that data, right, to send a marketing email, right, you don't want to, and I'm going to use our names because we're here and it makes sense. I'll use my own name actually because that'll make it a little bit easier or harder. I don't know. Anyway, right? Like I don't want to get a personal email from an organization that's trying to make a connection with me that says, "Hi, John Picozzi." Like that feels deeply impersonal to me, right? I'd much rather be able to have them say, "Hi, John," or "Hi, Mr. Picozzi," depending on, what the goal is, right?
but that's why in the next step, and I'm sure Jay will agree, then the step isn't first name, last name. The step is name and, I forget the term for it, but, preferred name or
Yeah.
something like that. So then you put in.
Right.
What?
We are in this group very Eurocentric, right? And first name,
Sure.
last name is really easy to parse. You could probably even write a script to do that. But as soon as you introduce other names from other cultures, it breaks down really quickly. Even someone like someone famous, M. Night Shyamalan. What's his first name? Is it M? Is it M. Night? To your other point, like I don't like getting email marketing that assumes my name is Jay or Hogue or tries to figure out what the J stands for and inserts a different name altogether.
Oh,
It
well, that
feels
one
like
seems that one
you're tr-
seems wrong, but
I've
continue.
seen it. I've seen
Oh,
it. It's like
garbage, gross.
people don't believe that I want to be called by just a letter, right? But
There's a couple other easy examples too, like, you go to South America, they have 2 last names, right? You go to Asia, certain parts of Asia, they give a name
Mhm.
first name, last name are reversed. There it's just you need to the best way to really do it, if you truly want to address people, the way they prefer, like you said, John, you don't want people addressing you John Picozzi in an email like that unless it's truly formal. So that's why you give them what's your name and what's your preferred name. And the preferred name is just, hey, when you're talking to me, I want you to call me John.
See,
Or
so I would literally I would literally put in that, like, John Picozzi and John Picozzi. Like, what do you
what
mean my preferred name, right? There's a lot of parsing there. The M. Night
maybe,
what?
yeah,
Shyamalan the
And
M.
you're
Night
telling them you
Shyamalan
want to
example is super interesting to me because from, like, a data standpoint, I guess, or maybe my very analytical architectural brain, I'm like, first name, last name gives him the choice to say, well, my first name is M. Night and my last
right.
name is Shyamalan, or vice versa, my first name is M and my last name is Night Shyamalan, right? So like then they
But
have
what if you wanted
choice.
it to be one name and you're now forcing
Oh
a
boy.
separation
All
of
right.
like share? Share. she can't fill out your form because she
Yeah,
doesn't
'cause
have a last name.
yeah, would she prefer,
That's
like,
fair. That's a fair point. Fair point. All right.
It's thorny, right? So again, the original point being, we went in thinking this was a fairly way that we could contribute, and then there's lots of questions. There's how do you present? Well, what's this default contact form look like? Um, Depending on host, Drupal CMS wanted to be able to be easily hosted on a wider variety of hosts
Hmm.
that read cheaper hosting. Our Is our form PHP mail going to be able to support that in a way that we know is reliable? So there's a backup. There's already web forms already stores people that use contact forms and or any form. So we know that'll get saved in the database as well in case the email sending falls down and doesn't work. So like there was actually a lot more to what we thought was a fairly simple approach once
yeah.
you started to dig into it.
Well, and that's actually my next question, or actually that was the first question that came up when we started talking about this, but it definitely wasn't the place for the for this discussion. But you mentioned that there's some configuration options, and what's the configuration around where those emails get sent to? Because I feel like
Right.
that's the tricky piece from a technological standpoint, and like you really don't want somebody to have to go to the handler to input the email,
No.
like that will.
Yeah. And when someone signs up and goes through the launch process of Drupal CMS, they have to provide an admin email. They just can't provide an admin name that's not an email address. So that is the original. That's where those messages go right now. There's additional configuration to send that to additional emails if you wanted to, but we went with the default, again, trying to keep it as simple as possible. We know there's an admin, we know there's going to be an email. That's the original recipient for the contact form as well.
Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the only way that you could do it. I don't see how else it could be
Yeah, exactly.
successful.
Yeah. And we couldn't assume there would be multiple users, and we didn't yet solve for, oh, I want my donation form to go to this user, but I want my general contact form to go to that user. That's another enhancement that we
Yeah.
could clearly add in the next stage of this.
Yeah. And I mean, this also one of the things I see coming out of Drupal CMS in general is helper modules to simplify those pieces of things too. Like I can see a web form simple module coming out that just
Mm.
gives you the ability to only affect, like, where does this go? And maybe change the labels in some fields or maybe add a field or 2, but, like, it hides 99% of everything that web form makes available to you and just creates, like, a simple form.
Hmm.
You do that with web form. If it creates a simple form that people can fill out to, config form that they can tweak some of these things without, and I know that that would work well because, the beginning of web form was YAML form, so it's all config anyway.
Hmm.
But I could see that being as the kind of the next evolution. Like, how do we bridge the gap between the full web form experience and the CMS
Right.
recipe application, and give people the ability
Mm.
to tweak
I
things?
I could see like some just quick little toggles for some popular fields and maybe some
Yeah,
slight configurations that go with
Hmm.
those. Yeah. I could see like a web form for web forms, a simple web form for web form.
I
let's
mean,
not do that. But
that's kind of how we approached it. Again, the biggest question mark is going to be how the experience builder experience will change that and hopefully open up some pathways to do that middleware, as I said, that is a simpler approach to all the power that you have available, but keeping it to what the most common tasks are. Like,
yeah,
again, like you said, Kathy, toggling on or off a phone field. Like we don't ship a phone field, but maybe it's a simple toggle to add one. What are those other things that are like common but choices someone has to make? They're not the
yeah.
most basic, but they're like that one or two additional fields that should be easy to add or turn on or off.
Yeah. Makes sense. So we've talked to a few people on the show that have been initiative leads, and I think the responsibilities have varied as widely as the initiatives themselves. So can you tell us what your responsibilities were as the initiative lead?
Yeah, sure. There was some reporting involved, so especially early in the planning process, we had to give people a plan of how we were going to go about this. A plan included what research we had to conduct, what decisions we had to make, what those decisions were going to be, whether or not those decisions were accepted by the rest of the community or the Starshot leads, basically. And they were in charge of really running coordination, making sure we weren't making a decision that was going to affect someone else's recipe or vice versa. Um, and then setting about that plan, setting some milestones for ourselves when we wanted to have certain functionality ready to go. They gave us their timeline as well of when they wanted beta released and kind of hands down releases happening. Um, we had I don't think we needed our own Slack channel, but we participated in a uh, lead initiative only Slack channel again to do a lot of
Okay.
that asking of the community of what they were working on and how it would affect us, kind of floating with some decisions we had made and getting some feedback from folks. Um, and then it came down to getting some GitHub access to be able to start contributing that recipe. And there were some checks and balances there as well, of course, but nothing that you wouldn't already expect when you're working on an initiative like this.
Right.
So initiative lead sounds like a big job. And of course we appreciate you taking it up and running with it. But I imagine it's not all smooth sailing as far as like not so much the the leading of the people, but I mean I imagine there were other issues. Can you tell us about any unexpected road yeah, unexpected bumps in the road, I guess I should say, that you hit with it,
Yeah,
whether it was like, oh, that field didn't work out the way that we thought it was, or it was really hard to find time to meet, or whatever.
yeah. The decision, the most contentious decision was to whether or not to leverage the existing contact or web form, as
Mm.
you've said. That was the biggest one. We originally wanted to keep it very simple and go with contact form. We ended up using web forms instead, which necessitated hiding and turning off contact.
So, just a
Um,
question about that
yeah,
really quick. Was that a, like, initiative group decision, or were you talking to, like, Tim Plunkett or Dries or, like, the wider Drupal CMS group?
not Dries, but Tim, Pamela, a lot of the Starshot leads.
Okay,
That's the direction they wanted to see this go.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, and so it was Phil, the guy that did all the heavy lifting, really, in my mind, um, had a great initial pass, but had a little bit more trouble. Again, that this idea of like, here's the contact form that we created, here's the contact form that it ships with. It's there, you can see it, it's unpublished, but now you've got a confusing experience. So figuring out our way around that, which I might have misspoken before, but I believe what he actually did was he was able to uninitialize the config. I'm going to say this wrong, but he was able to work some magic to make it so that our contact form was the only one that was there, and it wouldn't present confusion for the end user in seeing multiple instances.
I
Interesting.
I don't envy trying to figure out all these little like it's always the polish, right? And when you're building it for
Yeah,
one client, you can just talk to them and be like, "What do you prefer? What works better for your team? What works?" When you're building it for a generic, nebulous, like, uh,
yeah,
uh,
you're
we
building for
don't know
everybody.
exactly who the audience is yet, it's a
Hmm.
lot harder. It's a lot trickier.
No, no, it is. It was a great exercise and mind shift, really, to try to think of something as broadly as possible. But as soon as you do that, you have a lot more decisions you have to make, or you have to be a lot stronger about the decisions you're making and why you're making them, because it will have a wider impact for sure. Um, it did go fairly smoothly, I would say, because I think at the heart of it, it was a fairly simple initiative. There's some bigger questions we had to answer, of course, but once those were answered and we had a technical approach in mind, the building of the recipe went fairly smoothly, even though recipes as a thing was fairly new. There was a lot of folks all doing it all at the same time, figuring it out for the first time. So I think Phil was able to get a lot of support from the community and kind of start to settle on some best practices for what recipes need to include versus what they can include, or how they can affect other things, other config from other modules. So that, at least from my point of view, went smoothly. Philip might have a different opinion there, but he seemed to be pretty jazzed about how that all came together in the end.
You mentioned Phil and yourself. Were there anybody else on the smaller initiative? Because you also mentioned the bigger. You also had a
Yeah.
lot of touch points with the bigger initiatives.
Yeah, but on our team, Rachel Hart helped me out a lot. I needed an additional sounding board, someone with UX and UI experience, and she's had a lot of experience with Drupal in general as well, having worked for the state of Georgia. So she knows the admin and authoring experience as well as anyone else that I know. So she was definitely someone I leaned on quite a bit. Um, Rob chimed in as well. Didn't have a ton of time to help fill out, but was instrumental in I think some of the earlier kind of architectural decisions we had to make. But really, Pamela was fantastic. She was my main contact. She was really great about answering questions, even though she's in Australia. She seemed to be
Um,
on a lot in Slack. So shout out to her, of course. And yeah, I mean, generally, like, because everyone was racing towards the same deadlines and goals, when we had a question, it was answered pretty quickly. And the community was really great about supporting each other through that.
So Pamela is obviously the project coordinator for
Yeah.
Drupal CMS Starshot, right?
Yeah.
And but it sounds like everybody that was involved in this initiative, was it wholly a oomph team that did this work?
Contact form, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. So I think it's safe to say your focus is UX and more on the front end, and there were certainly some back end pieces to this, as you mentioned. Philip helped a lot with that. Did you have any hesitation taking on an initiative that had kind of such an important back end aspect to it, or were you not aware that it was going to get complex on that end?
Yeah, maybe I was like blissfully unaware. Um, I also had great confidence in Phil. He has been working with Drupal practically forever, so I knew he would be able to figure it out, and more than that, be able to push back and say, "Hey, I know you want to do this thing. Doesn't quite work that way. These are the other ways we could do the same thing." Like, he's really great at that. Um, taking what the general idea is and giving us a couple different options and the way that we can execute on that.
So I have a question, not so much a follow-up to that one, but as much as you feel comfortable with, I'm wondering where the driving factor was within oomph to do this, right? So you said the team that worked on this initiative was predominantly wholly an oomph team. Was it something where the leadership came to you and said, "Hey Jay, it'd be great if we got involved here. I think like you should find something to do it," or was it the other way around where you're like, "Hey, we should really get involved. Like, here's what I think we should push this forward."
Yeah, I'll give full credit to Rachel Hart. She was the first one to bring it up. Say, hey, there's 14 initiatives. They're
Mm.
looking for people to sign up. It looks like people have already spoken for any number of them. These are what's available. I think contact form is something we could probably tackle. She might have been the first one to assume this sounds easy enough. Um, and then we took that to leadership and said, they were already aware that Drupal CMS is a thing. They knew about all the announcements, right? Even some of the earlier ones that just were starting to leak out. So they were already kind of ready for a way to jump in. And if someone was from the company was saying, I think we can do this, I think we can set the time aside to get this done and make this initiative happen and have enough organization and wherewithal to say when client work needed to be pushed off a little bit because this has a deadline that we need to work towards, get that blessing from them. Basically, that's
Mm.
all we were looking for and all we needed. We didn't need a lot of approval. We just needed to be able to say, put our stake in the ground and say, this is what I think we can accomplish, and we will prioritize it when we need to without dropping the ball on other things that obviously also have to get done so we
Yep.
can continue being a functioning company.
Right.
So
Hmm.
so once you got that approval and decided to do it, what was that onboarding like? What was was it like you just put your name in the hat and they immediately get back to you and then like good luck? Like how what because I haven't
Yeah.
side of it too much. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean it was fast and loose. We put our name in. We heard, I think, within only a couple days that, yeah, sounds great. I think they were judging on the fact that we had contributed to things and before. We're not like a huge name in the community, but we're well known enough. We've got some good talent on the team that do a lot of open source contributions themselves. So we had a decent enough reputation that I think they were able to say really quickly, yeah, that sounds great. Go for it. I believe there was one or two kind of onboarding meetings, one more general for everybody, and one specifically with a much smaller group talking about what they wanted to get out of the contact form initiative more specifically. But that was kind of it. The rest of it became a asynchronous communication because that's easiest. We had people working on different things all over the world. So that was really helpful. And then we had a couple Google Sheets, like I said, for reporting that we would put in what our plan was, what our deadlines were, what the dependencies and blockers were, that kind of like project management stuff.
What was the timeline like? You said it was pretty quick and loose. Um,
Yeah, I barely even remember now. I need to look that up, but I
He's
feel like,
blocked it out.
yeah, maybe. Um, this was coming together during the summer of 2024, I believe, and then we
Mm.
heard that they wanted to have beta released in November, and then strong enough release candidate for a 1.0 in January. So actually a decent amount of time, but when you're working on this in addition to other sorts of paying work, right?
Mhm.
Um, you got to make sure you're not ever forgetting about it, dropping the ball,
Mm.
and helping others that are kind of picking up the torch and running with it. So I would say it's probably like a 5 month to beta in November,
Mm.
which was fairly quick because of some of the big architectural decisions that we needed to make, and some of which depended on approval or other plans of action that other teams had.
Mm.
So before we let you go, Jay, I'm interested. Any tips or major takeaways that you could provide somebody that's thinking about stepping up to run an initiative?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one. Because I think contact form is fairly unique. There's these other, like you had mentioned, the AI initiative,
Mm.
which is really amazing, and I don't think has a lot of the same constraints because it's brand new and
Mm.
it can make a lot of decisions that are kind of independent. But I think it comes down to the fact that while as I said before, while things were kind of nebulous and getting built as we were building them or getting understood as we were building them, because it was such a huge community effort and everyone was sort of in the same boat, I really did feel like we had a lot of the support we needed when it came time to make a critical decision. There was plenty of discussion about the pros and cons, making sure that we had thought everything through so that we had the confidence to make that final decision when we did. I found it really, kind of everyone always says this, but a testament to how supportive the Drupal community can be.
Mm.
And this was a really nice to be kind of behind the scenes of a big push like this. Again, I don't think we've seen this kind of thing in the community for a long, long time. So it was nice to see all that focus and effort go into this kind of new frame of thinking. And I think it shows that a lot of people had a different way to approach things than they might have normally in the past too. So from some of the other initiatives, that was really interesting to see.
So I think one last question before we move to close out the show, and that is, what's expected in the future? Like, I imagine there was a huge, like you said, there's a huge push to get it out for January. Um, it's been out now for a few months. Is it just refinement? Like, how long are you going to continue contributing to this initiative? How long does it stick around, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we really released what we feel to be the MVP. If you go and spin it up, it's probably doesn't look like a ton of work because it's supposed to be really simple. Um, we want to expand that. Some of the things you guys brought up are some of the same things we've been thinking about, making it easy to modify that form with a couple of the common use cases, change the recipient, have multiple recipients, that kind of thing. For me, those are in the roadmap. Those are things that we can start to work on when there's contribution time we can dedicate to it, and get into the release schedule now that it's has a fairly normal cadence. But the big thing I'm keeping an eye on and will probably have a lot of effect of some of the things I've got in the back of my head for enhancements, again, is the experience builder interface. So what does that allow us to be able to do that Gin and Core doesn't make very easy, right? To put that middle layer in between web forms and this contact form recipe, I think that would be super powerful. But probably require a whole different set of skills because it's a whole bunch of different front end frameworks. I don't know if I can rely on the same folks. I don't know if Phil's going to want to help out with that or if he's super interested in learning. We'll see what kind of team can help us achieve some of those ideas. But once that kind of settles and becomes a little bit more understood, widely understood what his intention is and how it technically is working and communicating, I think we'll have a lot of other ideas that we want to bring to the table and enhance this with. So, um, and some of the future decision points, I think, as you also rightfully mentioned, is it a contact form recipe enhancement or is it another recipe that we can include that can also be independently included for someone that doesn't want the contact form recipe? Those are decisions that still will be very much top of mind.
Makes sense. Well, Jay, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you back on again 250 episodes later.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you. It was fun.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on social media with the handles Talking Drupal or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack and the Talking Drupal channel.
You can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. Learn more at talkingdrupal.com/TD promo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choose the Become a Patron button. All right, Jay, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, had some questions, comments, or ideas for the Contact Form Initiative, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. Believe it or not, email is probably still the best way. I'm on a LinkedIn. They should be fairly easy to find that way as well, but I'm not on the Twitters. Um, I'm not doing too much of the socials these days, so those are probably the two best ways. The Oomph website, oomphinc.com, and email is Jay Hogue, letter J, Hogue, at oomphinc.com. Either of those is probably the best way to get in touch.
And Kathy, how about you?
You can find me and Drupal.org at kback303, and you can email me at kback@unthink.com.
John, how about you?
You can find me at Picozzi.com or on social media and Drupal.org at John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at EPAM.com.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
If you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking.
Have a good one, everyone.